Welcome to our worship service here at First Unitarian Society of Ithaca. Here we gather, creating connections, finding inspiration, and engaging the world. My name is Mike Mann, and I am the Celebration Associate today. Thank you so much for joining us. Whether you are a first-time viewer or have been joining us on this year-long journey of virtual church, we are glad you are here with us. Please check our website for more information about how to create connections. If you'd like to receive updates describing opportunities for engagement, please email a request to office@uuithaca.org. Newcomers are especially invited to visit our website and complete a newcomer form on the homepage. We have a few announcements today. All are invited to the Cayuga Nature Center today at 12:30 for a nature walk and parent group. In-person services are coming. In November, we will start allowing a maximum of 40 participants into the sanctuary for in-person services. We ask that you register in advance, and please only register for one service in November, and masks will be required. More information will be available in the weekly bulletin. Our service this morning is being live streamed from our sanctuary in beautiful downtown Ithaca and will be available for later viewing as well as on our YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you at the live coffee hour that follows the service. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action.
Our opening words come from Universalist Clarence Russell Skinner. Beneath all curious customs and beliefs, deeper than ecclesiastical creeds, more vital and basic than priestly rites, stands one impressive fact. Man and woman touch infinity. Our home is an immensity. We live, move, and have our being in an eternity. This magnificent assertion is our greatest affirmation.
We invite you to join us now in singing hymn number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Good morning, friends. What a joy it is to be sharing this time with you again. Let's take a look and see what's in our Wonder Box this week, shall we?
Looks like you might need some help with that, Emily.
I do need some help with this. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie. Inside our Wonder Box today is a quilt. It is made from pieces of fabric stitched together to make one big blanket. This quilt was designed and assembled by Magdalene Lindeberg in 2015. It was made from pieces of fabric donated by members of this community. Pieces of this quilt that you see here are meaningful to those who donated them and include a cloth napkin, clothing from beloved friends, family members, and children, old sanctuary velvet, hand-woven fabrics, a bridal veil, fabric made in different places around the world, and more. Sometimes quilts are made by a group of people, or in this case, made from pieces provided by many people. When working together, quilters promise to allow everyone to stitch in their own unique designs. Instead of one person creating a blanket and loudly shouting, "Look what I made," quilters create together and proudly sign, "Look what we created together." This is also a great way to think about our monthly theme, cultivating relationship. Because one of the key ways we UUs cultivate good relationships is by promising to allow everyone to contribute to the building of community. In UU congregations, everyone's unique ideas and loves get to be included. In our UU faith, this kind of promise-making is called covenanting, something we keep talking about because it is so important to who we are. First, we take individual ideas about what is important to us. Then we write and rewrite the words to make sure they say just what we want them to say, and everyone is comfortable with those words. Then we have to adopt it and remember it. Then we have to try to live by our promises. When there is a mistake, we have to fix it. This is all part of living in covenant. A covenant is like a quilt. It is made by many people. It has many layers. It also provides comfort to everyone, just like a quilt keeps people comfortable and warm. So today we're going to explore a bunch of ways in which promise making is important and helps to ensure we are cultivating relationships that are healthy and strong. And we're going to do that with this story called The All Together Quilt by Lizzie Rockwell. The All Together Quilt. Jennifer and her friends meet on Fridays at the community center. They are making a quilt. Everyone works together. First, Jennifer picks a fabric from the dark colors. Fran picks a fabric from the light colors. Jennifer traces a shape on the dark fabric. Then she traces a shape on the light fabric. Fran cuts out 2 shapes. Jennifer pins them together, and Fran sews them together. Richard and Maurice work together. They trace and cut and pin and sew. Look, 2 triangles together make 1 square. 2 rectangles together make 1 square. Fran and Jennifer, Richard and Maurice, Maria and Jocelyn, Natalie and Viola, Sana and Melissa, Anna Mae and Trinity, Angela and Betty, Ernestine and Zach. Together in pairs, they make 8 squares. Except for Naika. Naika works on 1 blue square. She uses special pens and paints and brushes. Next, they arrange the squares. They turn them and move them this way and that. There are so many combinations. The last one they try is their favorite. This quilt will have a border around 4 sides. Jocelyn measures and Anna Mae cuts 4 white rectangles. The pieces look plain, but not for long. Anna helps Jennifer cover the palm of her hand with paint. Jennifer presses her hand onto the fabric. Friends are invited to make handprints, too. Now all the pieces are ready. Labels show which piece goes where. They pin and sew and iron all the pieces together. Soon, the patchwork is complete. Now it's time to layer the quilt. The layers are held in place with basting stitches. The quilt is attached to wooden rods. It's rolled tight and stretched across sawhorses. At the frame, Sana learns to stitch. She pokes the needle down from the top and back up from below. It's hard to find the right spot. She practices and learns. It takes a long time to quilt the quilt. Everybody lends a hand. On many, many Fridays, they sit and stitch and talk together. Finally, the last stitch is stitched. The quilt is taken off of the frame. It's trimmed into a neat square. Dot sews on a purple binding to close the edges. Many hands work together to make this beautiful quilt. But who will have it now that it is done? Everyone will have it. It hangs in the library for all to see. It's the quilt that Jennifer and her friends made, all together. Our story today was a true story. And in this true story, kids and grown-ups at a community center get together to make a quilt. To complete the quilt, everyone promises to work together. Everyone gets to take part. This story is a great reminder that cultivating relationship is about promising to include everyone. When everyone gets to take part and everyone's unique gifts are stitched in, the community is stronger. And on top of that, what gets created is more beautiful than any single person could create on their own. So please, share your gifts with us. We want to work alongside you and see what it is that we can make together. Because I know when we work together, we can do amazing things. And I hope that today we can play together too. Please join us at the Cayuga Nature Center for our Nature Walk and Parents Group at 12:30. All are welcome. All are valued.
Let us enter into the spirit of prayer and meditation, reflecting on the words with which we opened the service. Man and woman touch infinity. Creatures on this planet, we reach above and beyond what we know. We invent devices that enable us to see far beyond our physical reach and to imagine even more. Our home is an immensity. We, each of us, is small, but we all live in a reality so large that it challenges us to be larger than we feel. We live, move, and have our being in an eternity. Though our lifespans are brief in the eons of existence, we know this reality, acknowledge it, and seek to understand it. We live and move so that it matters. However short or long our reach in time and space, however much or little of eternity we can experience, what we do and what we know matters. Blessed be, amen.
Ancient Mother, I hear you calling. Ancient Mother,
Each week, we take an offering to sustain the important ministries and programs of this congregation and its presence in Ithaca. The giving information will appear on your screen in a moment during the offertory music. Giving to the plate is important. It's a symbol of our gratitude for this service and our ongoing commitment to support the work of this choice. So please take a moment and give through either the text option or the giving button on the homepage of our website. May these gifts bring about connection, inspiration, and engagement within these walls and beyond.
Okay. This morning we do not have a reading apart from the sermon. So you get my words with maybe a little quotation here and there. Keeping the rights we have. We have experienced in recent years efforts chipping away at rights that were hard won in the 19th and 20th centuries. This has been the project of the radical right in this country. Targets include voting rights and a woman's right to choose to have an abortion, even fair housing, a hard-won struggle through much of the middle of the 20th century. Over the course of modern history, the rights of citizens have expanded in some nations and contracted in others. Following the Second World War, many nations ratified the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which gave the world a common language and a catalog of rights, if not a universal guarantee. Even nations with strong civil and political rights are not uniformly observant of all human rights or the rights for all persons, and that includes our own. No nation, in fact, that exercises capital punishment is ever in full compliance with the principles of human rights. Nevertheless, recognition and compliance with human and civil rights have expanded over time and around the globe, but they can be restricted. This can happen more than once in a given nation with changes in governments, whether through peaceful or violent means. One extreme example of restriction in the 20th century was the legal electoral takeover of the government in Germany by the National Socialist Party, the Nazis, which led to what we now know as the Holocaust and the Second World War. It was the Holocaust that galvanized many nations to endorse or adopt the language of human rights, and several declarations that together constitute what has been called an International Bill of Rights. A strong example of positive action to expand human and civil rights comes from the 20th century. There are actually several, but we all know and recognize the importance of the civil rights movement in this country for integration and for the expansion of voting rights. Now, in getting ready for this morning, I went back and reread the United States Bill of Rights, which consists of the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and were adopted in 1789, when it became clear that to the early leaders of this nation that we needed an assertion of our actual rights and not, merely open space. They needed to be protected. They had won the war for their independence, but they needed to protect the rights. So the first 10 amendments began with, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. That's primary. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the governments for redress of grievances. The Second Amendment constitutes the need for well-regulated militia to protect the security of a free state, and therefore the right of the people to bear arms would not be infringed. But the Third Amendment, just as important, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the owner's consent, nor in time of war except in a manner prescribed by law. There's a long history of militaries coming in and taking over homes and towns and property and just using it and even destroying it. The fourth, the people are secure in their persons, their homes, their papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. And warrants cannot be issued except upon probable cause and specific information. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime except for presentation at a grand jury. There would be no arbitrary imposition of high capital charges, except in the forces, the military forces, during actual time of war or danger. And the second part, the protection against double jeopardy. No one shall be put on trial twice for the same crime, nor be forced to be a witness against themselves, nor deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. And the right to counsel, the right to have a lawyer in defense. And here's one that you may chuckle a little bit about. In suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. Well, $20 was a lot of money in the 1700s. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel or unusual punishment. Something that comes up often as we think about what goes on in the criminal justice system. And the Ninth Amendment, really significant. These enumerations of rights do not construe that other rights not mentioned are denied or disparaged. If it's not prohibited precisely, it exists as a right. Made clearer in the final of the first 10 amendments. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved for the states respectively, or to the people. That is to say, power doesn't automatically go to the federal central government. Now, there are additional amendments since that have expanded civil rights, including the 15th Amendment establishing black male suffrage, the right to vote, And the 19th Amendment, establishing women's suffrage, the right to vote. However, the right to vote was not extended fully to women of color until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We treasure our rights. We treasure our civil rights as citizens of our nation and our human rights as global citizens. And the overall trend since the founding of the Republic has been toward the inclusion of more persons within the protection of rights. At the very start, it was just free white males, and even property owners at that. But that right, the extension of rights expanded. There were decisions by government and local agencies, decisions by the United States Supreme Court, the expansion through legislation, the clarification of the language of the Constitution. The striking downs by the Supreme Court of law is inconsistent with the rights in the Constitution. And guess what? Both religious liberals and evangelicals were part of the process that created this. It isn't the property of one kind of religious person or another. James Madison, who wrote much of the Bill of Rights, was an evangelical Christian. Thomas Jefferson, who contributed a great deal, was a deist and possibly actually a Unitarian in his theology. But I'm not so much interested in constitutional law today, though I am fascinated by it, more so than even my wife, who's an attorney. But there has been erosion of the practice and enforcement of some rights by citizens and by some governments. That is how I would describe the recent abortion law adopted in Texas, virtually outlawing abortion in that state in contravention of Roe v. Wade and similar extreme laws in other states. It was a long struggle to restore a woman's right to terminate a pregnancy. You know, some people don't realize that there was no such uniform prohibition in the early republic and the colonial period before that. But this right, the struggle, was a struggle involved both men and women. And following the affirmation of the right to choose in Roe v. Wade in 1973, some of the states broadened their laws to guarantee access to abortion, and others maintained laws to try to keep a woman from making that choice. Abortion was legal about a dozen years earlier. Abortion was legal in New York State in the 1960s, but not in Massachusetts, where I lived at the time. Many religious leaders believed that abortion should be available, and through the clergy consultation group, helped women from Massachusetts get abortions in other states. When my girlfriend at the time became pregnant, in spite of all precautions, and did not want to bear a child to term, we traveled from Boston to New York City so she could end her pregnancy. We later went our separate ways, but both went on to become parents of the children that each of us wanted. Access to safe and legal abortion was never really universal, but it was widespread. Over recent decades, conservatives have chipped away at access through local laws, state laws, and litigation, and we are now seeing laws such as that in Texas, again, forcing women to cross state lines. I mentioned the expansion of the right to vote. We can identify that expansion as a process that began with early amendments to the Constitution, and it's a process that is not yet complete. Although much expanded, it is still not truly universal. Some states and local jurisdictions will make it as hard as they can for you to vote. Others try to make it easy. There have been reactionary efforts since the adoption of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. Some states have instituted costs that look a lot like the poll taxes that have been abolished, like photo IDs that cost money, or proof of tax payments. As I said, special forms of ID that require effort and expense. A number of states have decreased the number of polling places in recent years, sometimes closing the only location within a reasonable driving distance of a rural area, or closing some located in poor and minority urban areas. Some people have to make more of an effort to cast a ballot than others. Most of us here listening this morning probably live where it's easy to do that, but not all of our friends and neighbors do. Now, I have stood outside polling places at many elections, at the legal distance, of course, to distribute candidates' palm cards and information about ballot issues and speak with my fellow citizens. The right to vote not only needs to be used, but we also have to use the right to persuade our fellow voters of we think is the correct choice. Now, don't be worried. I'm not going to make any specific recommendations on any upcoming elections today. That's not my work. But the right to vote is not the only right we need to be sure to keep and to use. The freedom of the press is another. Now, we have legal freedom of the press in this country, and it can be protected. But some publications are limited in reach and by how they are distributed. As I travel, I go to cities where I once saw many newsstands with several international and national papers and perhaps 50 or 100 other periodicals. And they still exist, but they're fewer and fewer. Part of freedom of speech and press require a wide open, actual functioning market. I remember as a teenager growing up in the 1960s in a small city that was large enough to have several bookstores downtown and also a college campus. Yet, my friends and I, even with those resources, we were such avid readers that we occasionally went to a bookstore in a nearby suburb that was pretty spiffy, or took the train to Manhattan to go up and down Fifth Avenue, which was then lined with bookstores, and find books and magazines we couldn't find at home in Danbury, Connecticut, or one might think the owners might not sell them to someone that young. Civil rights such as voting and fair employment and the press are important, but so are rights related to the civic realm and to the social and economic realms. The right to shelter, the right to health care, the right to live where one wants to live. Regarding the latter, there are discriminatory housing laws that have been addressed under the rubric of civil rights enforcement, but that battle isn't totally won. Just as important, there are larger economic issues that limit housing choices and even personal mobility to what is legally accessible under the law, but economically unattainable for many individuals and families. As a liberal, I need to support groups working on issues such as these, where economic conditions and social status and prejudice play a part in depriving people of all the rights they need and deserve to have a full and rewarding life. Action for justice in this area has a long history in Unitarianism and Universalism. Some of this work has been through charity and sometimes through direct action and sometimes through legislation. There were groups of our predecessors working to address both poverty and slavery before the Civil War, some even before the War for Independence. Excuse me. James Luther Adams was a Unitarian Universalist theologian who lived from 1901 to 1994. And I consider it one of the great privileges of my life that I was able to study under him. He was a lifelong advocate not only for liberal religion, particularly liberal Christianity, but a scholar of and advocate for voluntary associations. This church is a voluntary association. But so is a labor union, so is a political party, so is a soccer or football league. But Adams was very much concerned, not just with individual freedom, which of course is one of the things that liberals are very concerned about, but the freedom and ability of groups to be created by individuals in order to protect their rights, to improve society, to make the world better. Liberal churches that are congregationally governed, like this one, are voluntary associations. They are the very model of what makes democracy work. Adams expected his fellow religious liberals to care about society and act on it. They might not hold the same positions on specific issues or agree on priorities. They might not agree on the best course of action, even if they agreed on the issue. But it was his conviction that liberal associations are as important to democracy as individual freedom of belief and choice. The First Unitarian Society of Ithaca embodies the Unitarian Universalist commitment to the democratic process in religion and in society at large. And you see that when you read the Statement of Unitarian Universalist Purposes and Principles, right at the start. Democratic process is one of our core values. The church and its members can be forces for individual freedom. The church and its members can engage in shared action for the growth of and expansion of the public welfare. The church and its members here, right here, actually support Babies First, important program for young children. Many members of this church advocate for laws and for candidates and otherwise engage in the political process. But no, I do not expect the First Unitarian Society of Ithaca to endorse any particular candidates. Some preachers do, and some churches do. The preacher can do it as a citizen who happens to be a minister. But there are two reasons for the church as such not to endorse candidates. First, there is the constitutional separation of church and state. I think we all understand that. The state does not establish religion, and religion does not have a privileged place in the state. And second, the fact that any church, especially but not only liberal churches, must respect the individual freedom and choices of each of its members. It surprises some people to learn that Unitarian Universalist congregations have Republican members. They've always had Republican members. From the time when the Republican Party was the most liberal party in this country to the present day. Because there are politically liberal people and socially liberal people and politically conservative people and socially conservative people who are religious liberals. Being liberal in one area doesn't guarantee that you're liberal in another. Being conservative in one area doesn't guarantee that you'll be conservative in another. Now, one of Adams's contemporaries, whom I also knew, was Donald Lothrop. Now, Adams was an evangelical who became a Unitarian as a young man. He was raised as an evangelical. Donald Lothrop was a lifelong Universalist. He lived from 1905 to 2002. You know, you hear about these people and you begin to think that maybe being a liberal religious leader is good for life expectancy. A lot of these guys lived a long time. Don Lothrop took on more radical stances than did Adams. He actively supported labor organizing and civil rights, even from an early age between the two world wars, before he became a minister after completing his military service in the Second World War. The church where he served for nearly 40 years was a church that invited many guest speakers to its pulpit. And the speakers came from across the political and social spectrum. I remember one time when I was living in Boston, he had the then very conservative governor of New Hampshire, Meldrum Thompson, in as a Sunday morning speaker. Now, the church was also infiltrated by plainclothes police and occasionally FBI agents. It had, historically, been the headquarters of the Sacramento and Vanzetti Defense Committee during that horrible trial when the two anarchists were killed by the state. And just a couple of years before he died, I visited Don Lothrop on his farm in Wiscasset, Maine, where he had retired to. After spending many summers while still a minister going up there and raising onions as a hobby, basically. He had more onions than anyone I know ever knew. But I visited him on his farm not long before he died. And he said to me as we were sitting there talking, "Of course I was a Red." Now, if some of you are too young to know this, Red was a term for a communist. Of course I was a Red. Well, both James Luther Adams, absolutely a liberal Democrat in his political philosophy, and Donald Lothrop, a leftist, thoroughgoing leftist in his, were committed to liberal religion and the democratic process, even if their critiques of society were done differently. But they both avidly engaged in and encouraged the process. Well, a few days ago, I went into Buffalo Street Books for the first time here in Ithaca. That is a great bookstore. I bought 2 books. One is a collection of short stories. It's a series that comes out every year, the best short stories of whatever, 2021. And I've read a few of these. And one of those stories is set in the future about living in the United States of the future where authoritarianism has supplanted functioning liberal democracy. The narrator spoke of how she could have in the past stood up and acted more strongly to keep democracy alive. But she and too many others had not. They went along with its gradual shrinkage through regressive laws and actions. And that's the lesson. How do we keep the rights we have? By defending them, by using them, by exercising them, and in exercising them, expanding them. That's how we do it. We only deserve our rights for as long as we use them. Blessed be and amen.
We invite you to join us in our closing hymn, number 121, We'll Build a Land.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go
May the peace that surpasses all understanding, may the justice that knows no bounds, and may the love that burns in every heart reach us all, support us all, enable us to live in freedom, in justice, and in love, and serving our brothers and sisters in their need, in making this land more just and more peaceful day in and day out. Amen and blessed be.